Hello, everyone. I'm Huan. I work for Cash App. It's the #1 finance app in the US. You can just check the download ranking in your favorite app store in the finance category. But even in the overall download ranking, we're typically within the top 20, right up there with Google Map, Facebook Messenger. So a very popular finance app. We have 50 million monthly active users, 50 million plus monthly active users. My team is responsible for access management, authentication, authorization, fraud, account takeover, all that stuff. And my team is in the process of implementing Passkey, and we have a bunch of insights learned along the way. Thought we use this opportunity to share some of that learning, hopefully help with your adoption journey. Hopefully you have heard a lot of talks on Passkey in this conference. You may have seen this slide from Apple last year when they announced it. There's a lot of benefit of using Passkey, so I'm not going to belabor on that. And hopefully you're convinced by now that you need to jump on the journey and start adopting it. We firmly believe in the technology because we care about account security. We're a magnet for fraudsters coming in to attack us, and we really need to secure our front gate, improve the posture. But adopting Passkey is not a couple of lines of code. There are a lot of quirkiness in the process. So I thought this talk is about highlighting a few things that you should think about. I will respect your attention span. I will only talk about 4 things, and hopefully you can take away 1 or 2 things in your mind. I will talk a little bit about the platform variability that exists today, and also talk about how do you step out your security posture. And then I will also highlight some differences from password, and then conclude a little bit with this transition journey. How do you think about this transition? I'll start with the platform variability. You may have heard this beautiful vision that the Passkey will magically appear on another new device, and this is part of the draw of Passkey. But reality is, this is a little bit of a lie. If you look at the current state of art, we can examine all the platforms separately. Easy to look at the Windows platform. It doesn't have Passkey today, so it's not there yet. Google is going to announce the Credential Manager API pretty soon, so it can come out very soon. So on the right-hand side, this is a Google platform. Even in that Google platform, what that really means is you can share keys between the browser and native app in Android platform only. And then let's look at the 2 boxes in the middle. You think Apple controls the whole ecosystem. They can do a better job, provide a seamless experience. Even Apple is not quite there yet. In particular, on the Mac platform, each of the browsers are in a separate sandbox. Only Safari is sharing that passkey that's stored in iCloud keychain. Imagine if you're a user like me, I'm a big user of Chrome. You're in pretty bad shape. Whatever platform you're in, you're your own confined platform that you're not sharing the keys, even if you're on Android versus on iOS, or not even with Mac. Your iOS key on the Chrome is not shared with your Chrome on Mac even. Imagine this experience, how to explain to the user. I'm a lot confused myself, and let alone the user. They're not going to understand this behavior. So the implication for us is that you should expect there are going to be a lot of passkeys that you have to manage. We love password because it's simple. There's only one thing to manage. Have you ever heard of the concept of second password? There's no such thing. But because of the platform variability, you're going to have to manage many, many passkeys, even for the same account on the same RP. So just as what will happen in real life, when you have so many passkeys, you're going to end up with this problem. You don't really know what that's for. So advice for you is start managing your key just like you would do in real life. Tag them so that you know what they're used for, and be able to be intelligently figure out which key to use in what situation. So in the context of Passkey, in the ceremony where you enroll Passkey, think about how do you capture more context. Because Passkey is just a bunch of random string. It's a private key, a public key. There's no way to recognize them. You need to capture the context to know what they're for. Most important, capture the user agent. It tells you the platform and the browser that the user is using. In addition, on native app, if you have the permission, definitely grab that user, the device name. That's the device name that user input in. They can correlate that with that a lot more relevant to themselves. Capture the creation time, maybe IP address, whatever context you have. And last, I would also encourage you to think about whether you want to build additional user flow to prompt the user for a key name before you enroll them into the WebAuthn ceremony. That gives you additional input, but that's additional user friction, something for you to think about the trade-off. And once you have these tags, you can do a lot more intelligent things. So at minimum, do a little bit sort of platform detection. If you see the user enroll the key on iOS and they're logging on iOS, feel free to prompt the key, ask them to go through Passkey. But if they're logging in Android, be a little bit mindful. Either you don't prompt them for Passkey, fall back to the old mechanism, or if you're really happy with that QR code flow, be deliberate. Prompt them for QR code and give them instruction how to follow through that flow. I'm not a big fan of that flow, so really we need to educate the user a little bit in that particular scenario. The other thing I would encourage you to do is try to do this silent fail. This is in the case, even in the platform you know, and you have some keys for that platform, there is a possibility that user disable the syncing on the key. So it may not necessarily be available on that device that you're trying to log in. So what you should do is tell the client side, oh, I have these two keys, try them. If none of them exist, fall back silently to other authentication method. On native app, iOS and Android, there's the prefer immediate available credential. That's the way you can tell them, leverage that capability. On web, doesn't exist yet, so try to avoid that. You're going to come up with this ugly prompt to say something went wrong. The user doesn't understand it. So try to avoid it. Don't do that on the web. Next, I want to talk a little bit about security guarantees. We are a financial institute. We care a lot about security posture. And before Passkey, the old FIDO, the key is stored in hardware, in TPM. There's a nice property with the TPM is that there's no interface to export the private key. No matter what you try, there's no way to extract them out. So you can live with peace of mind. But now Passkey is essentially storing the key in software and synced through cloud. Not that I'm saying software could not be bug-free, but software just enables all sort of innovation that you could put on top of it. And this is not just a theoretical argument between hardware and software, which one's better. In reality, it's happening. As soon as Apple released Passkey, they built this airdrop of capability. And the moment you have human involved, you know you have vulnerability. Human going to make a mistake. They're going to try to drop the key to their friends in airport and then pick somebody wrong. Now their key is shared with somebody else nearby. So if you think about the security posture, the single device credential, which is the old FIDO before Passkey, is super strong. It could potentially be classified as AAL3 security. Passkey lowered that a little bit. It could be up to AAL2. Don't get me wrong, it's still stronger than password and OTP. But as a financial institute, we care a lot, wanted to elevate the security posture as much as possible. There is a draft proposal called DPK, Device Public, that will try to shift up the security posture guarantee on that a little bit. But don't quite count on it for two reasons. Number one, it's still in draft. Number two, in the draft is classified as optional implementation. The moment you say it's optional for a standard, somebody's not going to be implementing it. So don't count on that being available everywhere. The reality is you can actually do the same thing as DPK is trying to do yourself. So here's a couple of simple steps to implement it yourself. Number one is tag your installation or your new devices that come into your platform. Like a device when it shows up on your, it's either a native app or new browser shows up for the first time, you send them a device token or device cookie, ask the client to persist. And in future requests, pass this token back so that you know who's accessing you. I think a lot of people do this already. And if you make these device token very long and has a lot of entropy, it's actually pretty strong security-wise. It's very hard for people to fake these device tokens. If you have the device capability to identify these devices, all of a sudden you can sort of do what DPK is trying to do. Associate a token with your public key to remember where that key has been used. In this case, this key is being used on devices with the yellow token. The moment you see somebody else trying to use a private key on a different device, in this case, the black token, you know something went wrong. The user ported the key. So you should, in this particular instant, in your UI flow, build up MFA step-up authentication. Do whatever you normally do risk evaluation, all sorts of things. There's already talk about some trick you can do. So do whatever you needed to attest this device to make sure it's a real user. And after you attest it, this is a trusted device, attach that token to your key to know that now you can trust both the black device and the yellow device. Third thing I will talk about is how this is different from password. Besides having multiple passkey, there's also a fundamental difference from password. Again, password is beautiful because there's only one thing. User really understand it. But the moment you step into passkey, there's a little bit complication. There are two keys. There's one private key, there's a public key. I can guarantee you, majority of your users are not going to understand that difference between public key and private key, why there are two of them. So the private key is managed on the client side. It's something that's not exposable to your RP, to your device at all. You don't know. You don't know where it exists, and you cannot control that. Public key is stored on server. I highly recommend you offer interface, allow the user to manage the public key, delete them, remove them when they need to. But this creates a problem that these two things could potentially get out of sync. Let's look at the first scenario. User delete the private key, but they have no idea they need to delete the public key. I'll say for this case, you don't have to worry too much. You don't really know what's happening on the client side, and you don't really care. This is for you mostly a garbage collection problem. User will never be able to log in with that private key to start with. But the second case is a little bit more interesting. When the user found your interface on the server side to manage your public key, so they're going to go there trying to remove the public key, but they still have the private key left in their settings in the mobile app. They don't know where to hunt for that. So I will offer you a couple of strategies on how to think about that. One is there's a parameter in the protocol. It's called allowed credential. What that means is you tell the front end, I have these two keys for you, and only authenticate if you have any one of these keys that I know about on the server side. So if they have a dangling private key on the client side, I essentially tell the client side, don't worry about it, don't use that key, because I have know nothing about it. The second strategy I personally like a lot more is when the user comes to your website trying to delete the public key, don't actually remove it from your database. Just mark it as deleted. And in the future, when a user comes in to authenticate with that private key, you can offer a lot more contextual information. I call it sort of coaching moment. You actually delete this key 5 months back. Don't use it. Now here's the instruction how to go to your settings app, find this entry, delete this key. And this is very relevant on the spot. Tell them step-by-step instruction. Now you give them opportunity to remove that disconnect between the client and the backend. They will appreciate your step-by-step guide instead of some vague message. They have no idea what that's for. Last thing I'll talk about is think through this as a transition. You've heard that the Google accounts, they talk about turning on Passkey as optional in. They don't launch that full-fledged from the beginning. You should think about this in the same way. And think about how to educate the user. This is one of the apps that's already out there. This is to the extent the app today educate user about Passkey. I can tell you users really don't understand Passkey at all. There's the US guideline released this week, talk about how you should communicate. There's some sample. I would encourage you even go beyond that. If user want to learn, add another button to tell more details about Passkey so that they could learn about it. Hopefully, all of us adopt Passkey, and we all try to do our job to educate the user. When the user see left and right, they see the Passkey keyword, they can learn more about it. Over time, they will be educated. We can remove these sort of education. But for the transition period for the next few years, this is a key for all of us to do to be successful in this transition. The second thing to think about in the transition is think about this as a gradual shift of method. And Passkey is only one way to log in. You should still have many other paths, like existing flow, coexist along with it. But as you have these other paths existing, your security posture is as strong as your weakest link. So as soon as you introduced Passkey, a fast path, think about making engineering investments to beef up other security flows, especially for people who adopted Passkey. You really should step up the authentication. In particular, as an example, the account recovery flow, make sure it's strong so that there is not a weak link. We counting on people adopt Passkey, be able to present them a phishing-proof mechanism, increasing security posture. But if you don't improve other flow, you'll never get there. So I'll conclude the summary is hopefully you take away the message. Passkey transition will take many years, in my prediction. We still see in our user base, we have users don't understand biometric. They turn it off. They worry about their face and fingerprint get collected by Apple and Google. This is 10 years after Apple introduced biometric already. We're probably going through the same journey without Passkey, probably a 10-year journey for us to go through this together. And along the way, the world is not ideal. There's a lot of platform variability. Hopefully you're thinking through all these variations, do a little bit more detection, do a little more intelligence, make sure that provide great user experience. They will appreciate your pointed guidance. They will come back to you because you introduce a great user experience to them. Thank you all.
So we have some time for questions, so I will bring the mic to you.
Most of the discussion around passkeys seems to be focused on the consumer market. Do you see an application within corporate networks, or is that less of an advantage because it's more of a controlled environment?
No, I see a huge advantage. Within Block, the company I work with, we're enabling Passkey by default now. So we're actually logging in using Okta, and we're logging through with the Passkey now. So there's a lot of advantage because of phishing resistant.
So earlier in your talk, you mentioned a lot of the FIDO2 specs that were tied to hardware-bound keys.
Yeah.
How do you see the blending of the syncable passkeys and the hardware-bound keys in applications? And do you see any challenges there in the user experience?
Great question. Hopefully not, maybe this is just a short-term problem right now, but hopefully not a bigger challenge. The reason I'm saying that is because you have no ability to do hardware-bound key anymore. iOS just doesn't give you option. So going forward, you cannot create that device-bound key anymore. I think it's the same for Google Credential Manager. It by default goes into the software Google Password Manager. But if you're concerned about user having a private key, adopted FIDO before that, and trying to have a migration path through Passkey, that's some platform offering that capability. I heard Google is going to be working on that migration path from their old FIDO API to the Credential Manager API, allow you to migrate those keys over. I don't know how that works because the key is in the device. It's impossible to export that key out. But if you're thinking about adopting Passkey just from now, you don't have to worry about it, because there's no way for you to have a device-bound key to begin with.
Can you maybe elaborate on the different syncing mechanisms? Because 1Password has announced that they're providing passkey support.
Yeah.
So for us, like for enterprise use cases, we may be interested in writing our own syncing mechanisms.
Yeah.
Is that possible today, or is that going to be possible in the near future?
It's a vision that to enable third party to have a better portability vision to enable for us. That's the vision. But the next few years is going to be a little bit bumpy. We're not going to be probably getting there. Actually, I forgot to mention in one of the slides that this is probably creating more confusion because there are more ways for us to sync. It fundamentally requires the platform to open the API to allow you to hook into, grab the key. Google's working on that. In Android 14, they will have it. Apple's working on that, but I don't have any idea when they're going to release it. Even when they release that, they still have this Mac OS particularity that's the browser is in their own sandbox that they need to solve. So for the next few years, even though everyone has a vision to enable third-party vendor to get across the ecosystem, get across the platform limitation, it requires platform API support, which it will take time. And Windows can probably take a little bit even longer to expose that API. So it will take some time for us to get to that vision. Good question.
I have a question actually just on that one too. Mac OS has released the API for Chrome to adopt. It's just a matter of time before they do.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about collecting user agent information and other things associating with the key, giving the user a good user self-care experience so you can understand what sort of keys they got. You didn't mention anything about whether or not to collect attestation. I'm just interested in your point of view on whether you collect attestation if it's available, or you choose to not to improve the user experience. Can you comment on that?
Great question. You could connect attestation, but attestation today is built with privacy in mind. So they don't get to the resolution down to, there's some threshold, 10,000 or 100,000, whatever device level, they can do attestation. And I think on the Apple side, with the Passkey, they don't do attestation. So you cannot count on those attestation being there. I left it out just because it's not a universal mechanism you can collect context on, and you cannot count on exist in a lot of common scenarios. But if you're able, if you can benefit from that even smaller adoption for attestation, and I would definitely encourage you to collect more and more. The more you can collect, the better. But to us, it felt like it's too much work, yet the benefit is small just because we're not collecting attestation today. Yeah.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you all for speaking.